found a tape of a woman being killed. I was at my grandmother's house, helping my grandmother move furniture around. She became my mother figure after the death of my mother when I was a young child, and I had been staying with her ever since my car accident. My grandmother helped nurse me back into health, so I made an effort to alleviate her of any and all physical task. I felt it was the least I could do. It was in the attic when I accidentally knocked over a box. The box was filled with VHS tapes, with the farthest dating back to 1990. All that was written on them was the year. There was a TV in the attic as well because we used the attic as more of a functioning room than a storage space. So I decided to play the oldest tape. I expected to see happy memories, home videos, scenery, anything other than this. The video starts with whoever's holding the camera filming a woman sitting alone at a small table at a coffee shop. The camera was zoomed in on her hair glowing in the light, fixed. The tape then skips to a new setting, in what looks like downtown Chicago somewhere. I can see the back of the same woman from before, walking down the street, oblivious to the person trailing and filming behind her. The sky is now dark gray. I can see lights from passing cars glinting off her shiny boots. The camera is clambering and rubbing up against the jacket of the cameraman. He or she is not far from her, but is far enough to show that he or she is not with her, clearly stalking her. The scene lasted maybe 5 minutes of the monotonous walking until it shifted to the woman now bound and stowed in the trunk of a car. She was taped up, unable to speak. All I could hear was the sound of heavy rainfall accompanied by her screaming and crying. Her muffled panic broke my heart in two. My spine became frozen. I couldn't open my eyes any wider. Any moment, the film could shift to something so much more grotesque, so morbid, so life-changing, and I couldn't do anything but watch in horror. I saw a black-gloved covered hand sprout from behind the camera, slam the trunk door closed, trapping her inside. It's now clearly night. The next scene skips to the woman, now beaten and bloody while tied to a chair. The location looks to be a warehouse somewhere, the only light coming from a single fluorescent bulb above the woman, illuminating pools of crimson red blood at her feet. The camera is steadily held, so much that it seems to be propped up by a stand. I can hear the poor woman moaning in pain underneath the tape covering her mouth. I can also hear something shifting around on the concrete, like someone adjusting their stance. It seemed manic. I could hear clampering of metal, like tools being packed or unpacked from a bag. My stomach now fully turned. The stalker then walks into frame, showing only his back. His head was completely covered in a balaclava. He carried a blade in his right hand. My heart completely halted. The stalker held her drooping head up, tilted her face upward, and began to slice her throat from left ear all the way to the right. She squirmed and gargled in her desperate and useless attempt to survive. I had never seen so much blood in my life. The killer then takes off his mask and stares into the camera, flashing a toothy grin. The film then abruptly stops. I was held in place by my now shot nerves. My blood slowed into stillness, completely discoloring my body into an almost corpse-like white. My grandmother was watching me. She shakily tried to console me from across the room, struggling to form words through the river of tears streaming down her face. She said she didn't want me to ever be reminded of who I was before my accident. I found a weird old fetish site. When I was younger, I found a fetish porn site called don'twakethem.com. This was around 2010, 2011-ish, when I was around 13 years old. You might be wondering why a 13-year-old was on a site like that. Well, I had unrestricted internet access, and I was a weird kid. Sue me. The site was very Web 101, with a black background and the site's title at the top of the page. Everything was written in Comic Sans. The site had pictures of people, usually women, sleeping, with the sleeper's name under each image. Now, I assumed this was a fetish site because a lot of people shown were wearing clothes. Some were naked, sure, but it wasn't in an outright sexual way. It was more like they were sleeping than nude. I think the thing that people were supposed to get off to was the sleeping. The pictures, from what I remember, were taken in the sleeper's bedroom. The room was dark, but you could still see the sleeper because the photographer used the flash. Not sure if that woke the person up since the only pictures posted are those where the subject is sleeping. I remember checking the site out a couple times. However, I didn't visit it too often since the general vibe of it creeped me out. It felt voyeuristic in a way that made my skin crawl. Anyway, let's fast forward to a couple days ago. I was listening to a podcast advertise Casper mattresses, which somehow reminded me of don'twakethem.com. A bunch of old memories popped up into my head, and I decided to look it up. The site doesn't exist anymore, instead taking you to a page listing similarly named sites. On a lark, I decided to put the URL into the Wayback Machine and go back to 2011. A familiar black background and Comic Sans text popped up, along with a ton of images of sleeping people. It was just as weird as I remember. However, I noticed something this time that I haven't noticed over a decade ago. All the bedrooms looked different. Now that may not sound like much, but for a site that appeared to specialize in very low budget fetish porn, that means a lot. These productions tend to reuse the same sets. Here though, every bedroom looked different. The walls were painted a different color depending on the image. Some bedrooms had windows while some didn't. And none of the bedrooms had their furniture arranged in the same way. Maybe it was a bunch of people doing this independently in the same style? They'd take their picture and send it here. That seemed the most logical and least creepy explanation. Morbidly fascinated by the site, I kept scrolling through it. There were dozens upon dozens of images of people sleeping, all taken in that very weirdly voyeuristic way. I also noticed that there seemed to be images of teens and children sleeping too. They were clothed, but it still felt squeaky as hell. As I was scrolling, I came across a picture of a kid that had the same Spider-Man bed sheets I did as a kid. Actually, that kid had the same posters in his room that I did, and some Bionicle figure in the nightstand that I did. With growing dread, I look at the name under the image. It was mine. Okay, what the actual fuck? How did this site even have a picture of me? It didn't look like a picture my family took. It was in the same style as every other image on the site, with that same camera flash. I looked for some sort of email or contact on the site, but found nothing. I went ahead a bit on the Wayback Machine, hoping that maybe this site would list it on later. The site lasted until 2014, where it kept updating with new images, but there was no contact info. Going back before 2011 didn't turn up anything either. I tried Googling the site to see if anyone had ever talked about it, and found basically nothing. It looked like no one else knew about this site. I wasn't sure what else to do, or when to even discuss something like this. I decided to try putting this weird site out of my head and hope it'd make more sense in the morning. The next morning, after a pretty light sleep, I checked the site on the Wayback Machine again. However, the site was no longer archived there. According to the Wayback Machine, someone had requested the site to be removed. What the hell? Was the site taken down because I looked at it? How would someone even know that? Unless... maybe I didn't see the site. Maybe I imagined it or mixed it up with a dream? Not sure how I'd do that, but at the moment it seemed like the best explanation. I mean, it's not like there was any proof that any of this existed outside my head, right? I went about my day, trying and failing to put this entire thing out of my head. I put on some headphones and listened to a podcast to help myself sleep. I had nightmares of camera flashes. That brings me to this morning. I saw that I got an email from someone going by Sleepyhead. Just that name made my stomach drop. Taking a deep breath, I opened the email. The only thing the email contained was a picture of me, taken while I sleep, with that same signature camera flash. What really freaked me out was that, in the picture, I was wearing those same headphones I wore last night.